You got your mama's sunshine, you got your daddy's rain. You're like a piece of heaven in a hurricane.
Hey everybody, welcome to this week's podcast. My name is Josh Vietti. I'm here with my friend Tom Touchstone, Pastor Tom Touchstone. I'm with my dad, Pastor Ron Vietti, with my other friend, my bestie, Vince. That sounds, I can't say that.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I was like, wow.
I'm never going to say that word again.
Thank you.
BC.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
can't do that. I'm 42.
You it.
Hey, Fred, thanks for being in the audience.
we have an audience member
Yeah,
today.
Yes.
Which is
we're
exciting.
rocking it.
So anyway, thank you guys for tuning in. This is our 30th show. This is our 30th
3-0.
podcast. So kind of a big deal. We appreciate it. You guys are awesome. You know, you guys have been the personal feedback that I get. I don't know about you guys, but just having a conversation with somebody and just hearing them say, hey, this meant something to me, or thank you for being honest and real, or whatever it is, means a lot. So thank you guys so much. And
We love our audience. We love our audience.
we do. We really do. And so
today we were just going to do it on sports. That's all we were talking
we were
about
talking
this morning.
sports at the beginning. Who knows? That might filter back in. But we're actually talking about values, the importance of values, something I've been thinking about for quite a while, and really, really taking seriously the last year and a half or so. And so, Dad, you want to go ahead and start us off with?
Yeah, you know what? Values determine our future. You change your values and you'll change the trajectory of your life totally. Let me say something to our listening audience today, and that is, you are where you're at today basically because of the decisions you've made. Mm-hmm. And the decisions you have made have a lot to do with your value system. For example, if you're divorced today, it probably has a lot to do with decisions you made in the past. Those decisions you made in the past have a lot to do with your value system.
Yeah.
Why don't we start out by giving kind of a definition of values? It's something of utmost importance to you. Your financial status has something to say about your values. If you valued higher education, more than likely you're making more money than other people today, more than likely. You know, my parents, they didn't value higher education. I was raised as a redneck in East Bakersfield, and my parents didn't think a lot about college at all. They never instilled that in my mind. They insinuated that I would do like my dad did in his generation. When I was 18, I'd go out and get a job. And you know, it took some years for me to start coming up with my own values. And they were somewhat different than the ones my parents raised me with. You guys will see when your kids get older, it's kind of stressful when you see them start to take on values that weren't your values. But anyway, my parents did not believe in it. And probably 4 or 5 years after I left home, I started coming up with my own values, and I saw higher education as a real big value.
Yeah.
And so what I did, and it was the hard way, I went back to college after I was married. I was working 40-hour a week, and I was taking a full college load, 15 to 20 units.
Wow.
And working 40 hours a week. So if you don't value education, then you better value hard work. And so I valued hard work. I mean, you know, when I was a box boy and first started out in trying to get a full-time job, when all the other box boys would walk, I ran and I sweated. I mean, I ran with those carts back in, and I just gave it everything I had. And soon they promoted me to a clerk. And then when I was a clerk, if they told us we had to put up 40 cases an hour, I tried for 50. And so, you know, those values, whether it's hard work or whether it's education, they have something to say about where you're at today in life. Your values have a lot to do with who you marry. And that in return has a lot to say about where you're at today. Where would you guys be at today? Just use your imagination if you weren't married to the person you're married to.
Oh, man.
What if you married wrong? Would that affect your life?
Ironically, I wouldn't be here.
I did marry wrong. I was married wrong 11 years.
That's right.
And so it did. And one thing I love about values is those are the things that motivate you. And my values were off, and they motivated me in the wrong direction.
And you met Tiffany after you had a new value system in place.
Yeah, once I had the new value system put in place, I was able to, and I'll never forget the first thing Tiffany said to me is that I heard you changed. You know, I mean, that was the first thing she ever said to me once, we started communicating again. She goes, I heard you changed.
What attracted you to Tiffany?
Oh, well, the first time I saw her was her looks. And that was...
Isn't that the way it's most of us?
But I could tell you exactly what she was wearing.
Wow.
It was funny. I've told that story a lot of times. And,
but you saw some in her character, too.
not in the beginning.
Okay.
because
You're
I wasn't,
honest. This is an honest
because,
podcast.
because
We're
I
trying
wasn't,
to make it godly here.
because
but,
I wasn't saved. My friend John Hattie kept trying to set me up, and I was like, I don't want to until I saw her. I go, her. And he told me, he goes, well, that's going to be hard. She's got a boyfriend. And I go, is that a problem? He said, no. But I'm just saying, it was that look. And you've always said that you got to have the va-va-va-voom, but I had the wrong values.
Yeah.
And we both went down the wrong path.
But it turned out good for you.
Well, she broke up with me.
Very good.
She broke up with me because I had the wrong values. And then and that was part of my salvation, was that I started realizing that I needed to get new values. I tell people all the time, I knew Tommy was screwed up. I just didn't know how to get unscrewed up. Yeah. I could tell by the way things were turning out for me. And so once I put into place the values I was learning at the church, things started to come together. And then when I got back, when we talked, she said, I heard you changed. But it was for the better. And I think that's what now had things motivating me that motivated me in the right direction.
Now, a lot of people don't know I performed your wedding ceremony.
You did? You did?
Now you have grown kids, and it tells my age, huh? But you know what? I'm telling you, your values, listen to me again, they determine your future.
They do.
That's why when people give their lives to God and I want to start being a Christian, obviously they start reading the Bible, their whole value system changes. And from that point on, their life should change because of their values.
So I think there's a pretty significant dysfunction in the church world today. And I think it's because people have flipped morals and values. There's a big difference between the two. Morals are, well, let me start with values. Values are simply what you value, right? It's what you see as important. It's your centerpiece. It's what you are after in life, right? And I would say morals complement your values because those are guidelines to keep you in line with
morals are a value. They're a value.
Well, it's a way to keep you from messing up, to not get into to not get the values that you need. And so I think that in the church world, and I don't want to get too deep in this, but I think in the church world, people put morals first, and they never really knew their why, or never really were taught their why. And the younger generation grows up and says, well, why are we doing this? Or why are we doing that? And there's no answer. And so I think that it's important for people to set your values first and then build your morals around that.
Josh,
morals are guidelines, personal guidelines.
Can I throw a challenge out there to us? Because a value of mine is now spirituality, which there was no value for spirituality before salvation.
Right.
And that became the thing that balanced out everything else. Once that became my value, spirituality, that took all the other things and put them back into a proper alignment.
Right.
Because
Alignment,
when you're not, when you have no knowledge of Christ, you have no spirituality. And so I was void of that. But that was the single most important thing I needed to get everything back out. And does that make sense?
Yeah.
It was a very single thing I needed to get everything else back in the proper place.
Can I ask you a question on what you just talked with the values?
Yep.
And so are you saying that your values, when you write out your values, they dictate your morality?
No, I'm
or
saying
your morals? Because you just said your value. You should figure out what your values are.
Yeah.
Then you find out your morals.
Yeah. So let me. Give
I just want some clarity on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Let me give you an example.
Okay.
Maybe that helps understand. I was watching a master class, and I was at the moment interested in leadership, so I watched Bob Iger. He's the CEO of Disney. Currently, he was, and then he wasn't.
Yeah,
and
right.
He is again.
They got him back in.
Begged him to come back. And he talked about how he led the organization with a value first motivation. And so they have something called a vision statement, which is basically a laying out of what the values are of the organization. And so what's beautiful about that is anybody who works for Disney can understand what's important to Disney. And if they can understand what's important to Disney, they're going to know what to do.
Right.
So I would say values are what's important, and morals are, the way to do it, the way to get there.
Well, let me go back. One of my values is to have good morals.
Sure.
Because if I don't have good morals, it's going to affect my decisions in life, and my decisions in life is going to affect where I'm at today. But I want to say something you said, Josh. I want to capitalize that for a moment. As a child, I was taught a lot of values passed down by my parents, but I was never told why I should have them.
Right.
And so I began to question some of them. For example, my parents said, we will not drink liquor. That is a value in this family, and boy, that's it. And I kind of understood that, and I kind of didn't. When we raise our kids, we should go out of our way when they question a value to sit them down and say, here's the reason why we believe that. For example, and you might not remember this, when Josh was probably 13, 14 years old, we're sitting in the den and we're watching TV, and we were clicking the channels, and it came across a channel or a show where some gal was scantily dressed, she's making out with somebody, and Josh goes, oh, we need to turn that, that's bad. See, we had taught him that. But I said, let's talk about why that's bad. It's bad because it's so good to the flesh. I mean, that really appeals to us, and that will cause us to go out and do things we shouldn't do, and those things in return will hurt us. Let me give you this, you'll love this. Romy, our granddaughter, Josh's daughter, little one, it was so cute. See, you're enforcing values in the home. She, before she left, she went and told her Nana, she said, I need a Bible to take home with me. And we said, why do you need a Bible to take home with you? She said, when I sing Jesus Loves Me, this I know, I have to look at the Bible while I'm singing that. And so see, the values, man, I mean, we have to see that. And again, let's go back to that idea I had a long time ago.
I have more in that story because the rest of the story is she came home that night and she said, Daddy, read me this Bible. And so I opened up to the first page, and it's the story of Adam and Eve. And so I start reading the story of Adam and Eve, and she said, they ate the apple, Daddy. I said, what happened after that? She said, the police came. She said, the police came and took them in the car and drove them away. So I think, Dad, what it is you're watching the kids and you're teaching them good things, but you're also letting them watch the show Cops. So I think they're getting them,
combining
kind of confused.
That's
You know
Sorry,
what?
I just had to share that.
I was doing something the other day, and I watch Cops. I like Cops. And I didn't realize my little granddaughter, the oldest one, about 6, her eyes were big. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry, I'll turn it. Oh, no, don't turn it. I like this.
But you know what?
I'm not used to having little kids around.
Right.
It's those interactions, though, that remind me what is important. You know, it's like,
Yes, it is.
yes, it's important for them to learn the Bible story, but it's more important for me to sit there next to her and talk to her about it and read it to her and tell her that, hey, this is,
You don't know. I go around singing to those kids all the time. I'll go, I love you, you love me, and that's the way it's supposed to be. And they're all eyes, man.
That's so
I'll
funny.
point to them and I'll point to myself. But let's go back to the rule of first mention and how that applies to children. They say, they've done studies, that when we bring up a value, we bring up a very important truth in life, the first time our child hears that, the very first time they hear that, that will then serve as a not a shield, but it'll serve as a what's the word I want to use? It'll serve as a filter.
Yeah.
Serve as a filter. So any other time after that our kids hear something that has to do with that subject that we heard for the first time in our home, it'll have to go through the filter of the truth we learned the first time we heard it. That is important.
And changing your filter is hard to do, as we know.
Yeah.
Well, we need to do it first with our children, though, and we need to take them before they even get into school, of course, according to their age, and start telling them about our values before they get into school, and those values are challenged because now they have that screen, they have that filter that it has to go through.
I think one of the things we mentioned was explaining the values to the kids, but I think also living out those values is also is the explanation, because I think there's a disconnect with, well, we believe this. Well, why do we believe it? Then we tell them the why, like you said, but then not living those values out, because those values will determine, as you work and you live, they're going to determine the person you're becoming. So if you're not living them out, you can say you have all these things and you believe all these things, but if you're not living them out, you're never going to be a changed person.
Well, because kids, anyone, not just kids, but especially kids, learn the most from observing rather than being told, right?
Right.
And so if you speak it, live it, 100%.
Yeah.
Or don't speak it, because it can really mess them up,
Right. Well, I think, and you've probably seen this being, and you probably remember this being, when you were with Josh in the house and Tara, when you tell your kids something and then they see you doing the thing you told them not to do, like you say, don't jump off that rock, and then you go and jump off the rock. They're like, well, Dad, You told us not to jump off the rock. Now, more than anything, they want to jump off the rock. Yeah. They're
let me say something, too, to our listeners, implying that a lot of them are young parents of young children. That is, you have to develop the habit of when you blow it, with your kids in the room, say, can you pray right now? I want you to pray for Daddy. I've blown it, and I got to ask God to forgive me, and I want to ask you to forgive me. That says a lot, because none of us are perfect. And that should be happening on a regular basis.
I think it's important, to show your kids your mistakes.
But tell them why we believe in what we believe.
Yeah.
I don't hang out at bars. Why do I not hang out with bars? Well, if I go into bars, I will see stuff that will make me have bad thoughts, and those bad thoughts can ruin my life. For example, as you said, and let's not leave it too quickly, one of my values is morality. Now, how many guys or gals listening to us today have went through a divorce because at some point in their life they did not have moral values in their life? Yeah, didn't have moral values. So what they did, because they had no moral values, they went out, got into the bars, met, some crazy wild person there, slept with them, on and on and on, and it led to a divorce. So,
faithfulness would be like a huge factor.
That's a value
too, right?
That's a value.
Is just being faithful to God, or being faithful to your spouse, being faithful to your family, and that's if you live in a way to where you are completely devoted to the people around you, then you're going to do better. And, we get off track sometimes. People make mistakes. And I know I've made lots of mistakes and lots of issues. I went through a lot this last couple of years. And when it comes down to it, I learned the value of faithfulness from my wife and from the people around me, and like how important it is to just be loyal to your core, Yeah. And so one of my wife and I have been talking about setting up a value system for our family. One of the big things for our family is to make sure that our kids understand, and that we also understand that we look out for each other, not just for our own family, but for the people in our community, the people around us. And, I hope and pray that our kids grow up with that mentality of like, it's not just about us. It's not just about me. Right. It's about, even from the point of like, we're about to switch, and this could be a disaster. I don't know if it's going to be good or not. Tom, I need your wisdom on this, because he raised two girls, and they're full grown. They each have their own bedroom right now. And we're about to combine them into one bedroom, and then have a play area as the other bedroom, just to get them to really understand the importance of sharing.
You will live and learn.
Sharing space. So it's going to be interesting.
You will live and learn. This is the way you learn.
But
this is where you get experience.
It's an experiment, so we'll see what happens.
I think it's fun in the beginning. Our share room, and then now one's a teenager and one's not. And the teenager wants out of it so bad. I'm like, babe, you're there to just be a big sister. And she just looks at me with just, with that look.
That's good.
Well, you're always learning. I told your mother the other day how I value experience so much today. Because the older you are, the more things you went through, and the more things you've seen that you shouldn't do, and why you shouldn't do them. But let's go back and change the subject a little bit here. We need a basis. We need a standard for our value system. And some people out there listening to us, maybe they're not Christians. As Christians, the Bible is our basis for our value system. You've got to have some kind of standard to measure your values by. Values can't be arbitrary. You won't have I guarantee you, your life will not turn out the way you want it to turn out if you have arbitrary values. It's like, well, I like this because of this. I like this. You need a standard. And that's one thing that I just celebrate about Christianity. We have a standard for our values.
Well, we were talking about values the other day in a meeting, in our staff meeting. And we were talking about the importance of, the number one value, which is love. Great value. But just to reiterate what you're saying, is it's so broad. Oh, I value love.
Right.
Okay, well, what kind of love? Love for your car, or love for, you know what I mean? A football team, or love for your like what do you mean when you say that? And so you need to be more specific. And
the Greek has different words for love, and that really helps you a lot.
That's true, yeah.
But anyway, we need to probably write them out. I think at some point in life, that's very valuable. For example, let me just throw things up. What's your value about movie shows? Do you have one? I mean, for us, for years, it was like we would watch no R-rated show. When the kids were small, it was just PG. Our PG. What was the PG?
By the way,
PG,
just
PG.
Well, they changed all the ratings today.
they
I don't
did,
know.
But PG was like, if you go back, just on a side note, because it's funny, went back and started watching PG, movies with our kids, thinking, "Oh,
Home
these are great,
Alone.
yeah." And then we started watching like the Goonies the other day with our kids. We're like, turn it off,
It was PG.
because the ratings
The ratings
system
have
was
changed.
they're different now.
But writing your values out. What do you think about movie shows? What does your family think about drinking? What does your family think about going into bars? What does your family think about cheating and lying? And we know it's in the Bible, but why do we not do those things? And I think smart parents, even when their kids are young, will start figuring these things out and say, here's some of our core values, and let's sit down maybe one night a week and discuss why we have this core value.
Yeah.
That would help enormously. The Bible says if you train a child up in the way they ought to go, they won't depart from that way.
At the marriage retreat 2 weeks ago, we did our breakout session, Hannah and I, my wife, and we talked about your values being your compass and it guiding you and leading you to where you need to go. And for a lot of couples, they haven't wrote out those values and those morals and where they actually stand because they have no standards. So their marriage, they're both just wandering without having like these core things that they actually believe, bleed, and then also live out together, right? Because one may be living this and this is their value over here, but they don't understand each other.
Well, I think that's the definition of unequally yoked.
Right.
If you have different values than your spouse or even like your business partner or somebody you're working with, like you're going to be going a different direction. And then what happens to the yoke? It breaks.
Right.
It breaks down.
As my wife and I, as we grew in our faith, it was easy to pass it on to our kids. And then it was interesting to watch them. My daughter Tessa's married. It was interesting to watch her pick her spouse because I love Danny, and he had the same values that we had growing up. And then I've seen my older daughter Taylor, who she's not married yet, but she's come up with those values, and as she goes through the dating process, she's like, for her, she says, "Dad, I knew you, Mom, said it, but I know that I can't even consider having a relation with somebody that isn't a born again Christian."
That's good.
Because those values aren't there.
Yeah.
Now we reinforced those in the home, but then she went out and she's saying, now that's my value.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where you do have to do it in the home, but then as they go out there, they've got to be able to take what you've done and realize, yes, that is correct.
Yeah.
Because what she's seeing out there, and I've never sat down and investigated, what she's seeing out there, it is true, and I don't know if it's trial or error, but she's like, no, it's true.
Well, and there are core values and secondary values, maybe even third level values. I'm not sure, but if your core values aren't the same in a dating relationship, then that's a pretty big red flag. Right. Maybe though, God is using that relationship for you to change your values. That's possible, right? Now, that doesn't mean that if you're dating out there that you should go, find somebody and try to save them. I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is core values need to be kind of nailed down before you walk up and say I do. But the secondary and the third values, that you'll add those on as you go.
Right.
I mean, that changes over time.
Oh, as you grow.
I know, my values have changed.
Well,
a
what
lot
I
in the
wanted
last
when I was 20 years old and when I got
17
married is completely different
man.
than the 40-year-old version of me.
Yeah, how many years have you been married?
Yeah, this 19 years this year.
19 years.
Well, you said though, Josh, and I said it at the marriage retreat, God gave Adam responsibility before he gave him a spouse. And part of the responsibility is, tying down your value system. Some people, they become Christians. They give their lives to God, but they don't change their value system. And then they wonder why they're not blessed like some of the other Christians in the church. It's because obedience to that value system is the channel through which you get blessed. Obedience. For example, God created us. We believe that. And who knows the most about a product than the manufacturer? For example, if you got a leaf blower and didn't know what it was used for, let's say you give your dog a bath and blow dry him with it. You'd probably scare the daylights out of that animal, and it wouldn't serve its purpose. Or your little poodle got wet and cold. You put him in the microwave to dry him off, I mean, if you want to know what a product is for, you have to go back to the manufacturer.
Right.
God made us. That's our belief system.
Yeah.
And he's given us all these instructions in the Bible. If we structure our values around those instructions and obey them, then you're going to be blessed. That's what the Bible says. You're going to be blessed. It doesn't say you're going to avoid all problems, but you're going to be blessed. Even your trials will be turned into triumphs.
Yeah.
And so what I'm saying is, people in the church going, I don't get it. Why are they blessed and I'm not? We're both Christians. We're both God's kids. It's because one is obedient to the value system of the Bible and the other isn't.
Well, you always talk about, you say you have to see normal to know normal. And I think when you get saved, you've never known what normal was because you've never seen it and live out. So people come to the church and they're there, they're sitting, they're excited. They know that's like you said, Tom, you knew Tommy needed to change. You just didn't know why yet. And some of that takes, or how, right?
I knew
and
the
some
why,
of that takes
but I
time
didn't know
where
the how.
as you devote yourself to a community of believers or people with good, you see people living out these great values, seeds are going to be planted. Those seeds will be planted. They're going to be planted. If you're going consistently devoting yourself to God, then you're going to be able to grow. And I think that's where it's going to take place. But it takes a while for people. You know, we can't force that growth on people necessarily. But if they're committed, like you said something last Wednesday in church, you said, make it simple. Just keep coming back to this place, because coming back to church, being involved in community is where the seeds are going to be planted. And if the good seeds are planted, then good values are going to come out of that growth. But sometimes it takes time. You know, you can't expect somebody to change overnight. It would be nice, but those seeds have to be planted in order to see that growth.
Yeah, you know, I love the book Wild at Heart by John Eldredge. I'm doing a Bible study with some young men right now, my son-in-law included. And I think it's a great book because it gives a principle on a man. We're driven by a hormone called testosterone. It says we're wild at heart. Well, I think as all young men are that way, and we're all that way, that sometimes you have to go back to, like Pastor Ron said, the purpose. Men were made to be adventurous. Men were made to that. So then you throw a value on there, but you're not going to go out there and be promiscuous. So I think it's great to say, hey, we got to go back and find out why we're there, but then we've got to be able to put some boundaries or stop gaps in the way to help us continue to be that person.
Right.
I want to be wild and adventurous, but if I don't put those principles in my life, I'll get off track.
I think the church has really failed when it comes to teaching about sin and immorality as it pertains to values, because, like you said, Tom, you have to know the why. You just do. I know I needed it when I was younger in youth group. I had youth leaders just saying, "Don't do this because it's bad." Don't have sex outside of marriage; it's bad. But it's great for me because I'm married. Good luck. See you guys. That was a literal message that we got all the time. Don't ever drink. Don't do it. Because it'll ruin your life. And then you get older and you have a glass of wine and you're like, well, that's not so bad. It can be. It can be.
Right.
If you have 3 bottles of wine in the street, it can be terribly
If
bad.
people aren't going to church or committed to a church family, where are their kids going to where they have a healthy environment to ask that question?
Yeah.
I mean, the church is a good place to ask that question. Why don't we do that?
I wrote this down just a few minutes ago. There's a distinct connection between values and community here. It's interesting that we're talking about those two things together.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because Pastor shared something with me when my girls were young, because they call him Papa Ron, that I had to put people in their lives so that when they get to the age where the volume of my voice goes down, somebody that promotes the value that I do goes back up. Yeah. So the community is very, very important, because I talk to young guys all the time now, and I'm hit a fitness vein again, where they'll come to me and I'll talk to them all the time, because I tell them, the one thing you have to watch out for with being in the fitness game, whether you're in it for a competition, you're in it for looks, and I think it's always competition for guys, right? Yeah. I want to have big arms or whatever. It always is. But there becomes a point where there's selfishness, and if you're married, that won't work out well, because you'll start to grow more in, and vanity. And what I'm getting out of this, and I tell people all the time, you can have everything correct going in, but if you don't watch out and you don't have a point where I want to have humility in my life, that will get way off balance. So sometimes the need for one may rise up when you're maybe trying to get something else.
It's funny that you mentioned competition, because I've always considered myself as not a super competitive person. But I'm in the fight of my life right now against a really mean competitor, and that's the worst me, right? I am fighting the worst me every single day because I want to be the best me. And I think that that for me is a spiritual base that I can build upon, and then a mental health base, and then a physical health base as well. Because I want to live a little bit longer to hang out with my kids. I want to see my grandkids, and so eating better, exercising, all those things are so important. And I'm not suggesting that everyone have those values, but I would say that's kind of a core value to have.
Yeah. Well, going back to being a Christian, one of my core values is reading the Bible. I try to read it every day. And why do I see that as a core value? Because I have a tendency to forget. And reading the Bible every day is not, I don't do that to gain brownie points with God. I do it to remind myself. For example, I forget to forgive people. And that's going to hurt me if I don't forgive. That's going to build up stress in my life, like last week's podcast. I forget to consider the poor. I forget the sow and reap law, that what you give out, you get back. I forget to pray and change things according to God's will through prayer to be able to navigate those things. I forget to think on positive things. And so I forget all these things. And so a value is to read the Bible because it reminds me of the things I need to be doing to stay healthy.
Also, if you read a passage this year, reading it next year, it may have a completely different meaning for you because you're in a different place. It's not that the word has changed, but that you've changed and you're able to see it in a different way. I think
it'll have more meaning. Maybe not different meaning, but more.
Right. Well, sure. Yeah. Not
if I read it
the
right
meaning,
the first time.
Yeah, no, that's right. But yeah, different meaning. But maybe even just more impact.
You apply it differently.
Right.
Yeah.
Just impact on your life and where you're at in life. So yeah, definitely. That's huge to be able to pick up
the
word.
Why we have a value of attending church? I mean, there's so many. I come up with 10 reasons why I attend church or why I'm faithful to church or why I watch online or whatever I do. Why is church one of my core values?
Right.
Family. We go down the line. Working out. Time alone. Why are all these things values? And again, I don't need to write them out because I'm older than most people out there. I know they're imprinted in my mind, and my wife does too, have them imprinted in her mind. But for younger people listening out there, I would really recommend to them that they sit down with their family and start figuring out their value system and writing them out.
So I have actually have a resource that it's not really faith-based, and so I don't know if there's a faith-based values resource out there. If you guys know, please share it with us, and then we'll share it with our community. But I found this. It's actually a professor at the University of Jerusalem in Israel, and his name is Schwartz, which is easy to remember, is a watch brand, I think. He basically came up with this whole values hypothesis that there's this many core values, there's values underneath it, and you can take a test and you can do the whole thing. And I think I don't think those are ever definitive, but I think it's good to start there and really just ask yourself, what do you value the most?
Right.
What is it that you value the most?
Yeah.
And then as a Christian, you need to insert your faith, and you need to understand biblically what if you are a Christian, if you are a follower of the Bible, if you are a follower of Jesus specifically. Matthew 6:19-21 talks about your treasures in heaven, right?
Mm-hmm.
Matthew 10:39 talks about how we ought to value laying our life down more than we value our own lives ourselves. And so
altruism.
Those things are so important. I think that those are the core things, that I value my relationship with God because it matters to my family and my community. It also matters to me.
Right.
I believe that without God in my life, I would be lost. I feel like He's the one that keeps me focused. He's the one that keeps me on task. And I think that when you talk about the morals, you're talking about Dad, and values you're talking about. I think that comes from a very deep place of a very solid faith that you've had for a long time. And many people are kind of floating out there. Maybe some of you that are listening today, you're floating out there and you don't have that foundation. I guess that's the word I'm looking for, right? You don't have that foundation. My daughter was, it's funny hearing my kids, because they go to this Christian school, and they're coming back and they're telling me the Bible stories, and I'm thinking in my head, I need to correct that, and I need to correct that, I need to correct that. But at the end of the day, I love the fact that they're learning the basics. And my daughter was telling me about the house built on the sand versus built on the solid rock. And she got it all mixed up, and she's like, Daddy, if you live in a bad house, you're gonna be sad. And I said, okay, well, that could be true or it might not be true. I'm like, my analytical brain pops up. I'm like, wait, she's 6. Okay, calm down. But then talking to her about the solid foundation and how that really has to do with our faith. Like if you have that down, you can really build kind of like a value tree almost, right? From there. And it can grow. And like you said, sharing it with your family. I keep saying I'm going to do this. I haven't done it yet. I need to do it soon. We're going to write down our values, or I'm going to have them printed and put them up in our house because
I like the value tree. That's cool.
Yeah.
Everybody should have a value tree.
All right, we'll do it.
Yeah.
We'll do it. We'll share
I'm going to do one tomorrow for my wife.
Just for her.
For your wife. Just for her.
I say, this is your value tree.
This is your value tree, man. Yeah, I like it.
Because I know mine. Mine's in my head. Well, you know what? I don't know where we're going exactly, but maybe kind of change it a little bit here and talk about what are some of the enemies of good values. And I wrote down the first one is bad friends. They can corrupt good values.
That is good.
Why? Bad friends can talk you into things sometimes that you know better than to do. They can put bad images in your mind. I can have bad friends and all of a sudden they're giving nasty little stories and this and that, and they're putting thoughts in my mind. And I don't want those thoughts in my mind. My mind is a sacred place.
Right. Well, so you use the word bad, right? And that's kind of that's a specific word. And some people are bad. They actually have negative intentions. But some people don't even have negative intentions so much as they don't have the same values as you.
That's
like they just literally don't.
Yep.
And when they start to influence us in a way that isn't important to us, then we start to lose part of ourselves. We start to lose our center, right? It's so important for us to be centered, and if those friends can easily just
Let me ask you a question, though. If you have a really good friendship with some people that have totally different values than you, do you think there's any way you can keep them from not influencing you to a degree? I mean, if you're around them a lot, is that influence kind of be automatic?
It depends on the do. I think it's a cognitive dissonance, which is the idea of like believing something and not doing it. Because if you're hanging out with these people and you're engaging, then you're going to have this struggle, and it's going to lead to a place where you don't want to go. You're going to be constantly in stressing out, questioning yourself. You're not going to have a lot of confidence because you're living in two different worlds. Whereas you might be there to be a light,
that's different.
And that's completely different. But I'm just saying, if you have to be able to know where you're at and where your maturity is, where you're at.
Well, let's go back to what I just said.
Maturity-wise,
as Christians, we want to hang out with non-believers, people that have different values. We want to. I'm talking about a best friend that you're with all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, go back to what I said.
A best.
Go back to what I said. Let's say I have a best friend I'm with all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm determined that I'm going to be with him a lot, but he's not going to affect my values. Is that possible? Totally. Because let's say just one day he tells a real dirty story. I can't get it out of my mind now. It's in my mind. I can't get it out. And I'm going, then, I didn't want that in my mind. And 2 days later, he continues with a dirty story, and I'm going, oh, I don't want this in my mind. I'm talking about very best friends that you spend a lot of time with all the time.
Good friends can have good good friends can have hard conversations. If you have a friend that you consider your best friend or a good
you're with
friend,
a lot,
and they are having a negative impact on you constantly, you should be able to have the freedom to go to that friend with and say, what you're doing is bothering me, and I can no longer be a part of this in this part of the area.
Can it even exist, though, without negatively affecting you to degrees, what I'm saying?
This is my opinion. I think it's going back to what Josh said a little bit. It's almost an unevenly yoked thing. Because it's almost like you don't even think alike. And I experienced this. I mean, I have. I mean, it's just over the last 3 or 4 years I've got back into the fitness industry. And a lot of people are like, well, if Christianity was so good, why did you not stick around and help us? I go, I wasn't in a position to do that. But now I am in a position. So there are some friends that I've got that I can go back and have that same relationship with now because I know they don't get me. They're not.
It's just like it's using working out as an example. It's just the same. When you first start, I don't remember if it was you that said this, but somebody said it could have been you. Very well could have been you. Said that when you first start to work out, you don't deserve a cheat day the first week. you don't need to give yourself a cheat day. You need to be disciplined as much as you possibly can until you get the routines embedded in your mind.
I like this conversation because I like the workout thing because I started working out with Huntington. and he cannot lift as much as me. Obviously, he's he started working out and he's like 13 years old.
Give him a 6 more months.
No. I'm saying he's
Six more
catching up
months.
fast. But what I'm saying is, I'm willing to train with him and be patient because I know that he's going to get to the place. Our friendship early on, this is great. I love this because I'm not that we were best friends when we first met. We were in two different worlds. I came from a non-Christian, a lot of grief and background, and you came from where your dad, even when I'd hang out with you at your dad would get on to us all the time because he's like, that Vince is crazy, that like whatever's going on.
Yeah, I had a waterbed in my bedroom one day. I came home and there was a waterbed in my bedroom.
By that point, I should have known better.
And Josh said, Vince is living here now.
Vince did not live in his bedroom. Vince stayed with us.
We weren't that kind of besties
at our house, and he had his own room.
No. My favorite story, and this all plays into it. My favorite story is because I didn't understand what happened in your house instead. So one night you said, we're in high school, and you're like, you want to stay the night at my house on a Saturday? I'm like, this will be fun.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, great. Saturday night hangout. This is going to be fun. And
Party!
So we decided that, because I had bleached hair at the time, and we decided that we're going to bleach our hair that night. Again, we're going to bleach our hair.
No.
And we're in there laughing. Your dad used to call it cackling. I'm like, and he came in there and he's like, what are you doing? We have church tomorrow. And I looked at him and I'm like smiling because I'm like, huh? Church tomorrow? Like that ain't that big of a deal because it wasn't part of my value system.
It's Saturday night, man.
It's Saturday night. It's party night.
I was trying to get my thoughts together.
Yeah, and we're in there. I'm in there party. Josh knew better. He didn't know. But my point is, of our friendship equally, Josh completely yoked, but he stayed true to his values. And by me seeing him hold strong to his values, he wasn't moving. I was able to move and see something that God was doing in our relationship and in a friendship that was moving me closer to God.
Later in life, you did the same thing for me.
So yeah, there you go. But I'm just saying, so can it exist? Yes, Pastor.
Yeah, you can. Well, let's go back though. We made a statement earlier that as Christians, we have the Word of God as our foundation for values. And in 1 Corinthians 15:33, do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character.
Yeah,
and then it also says, do not be unequally yoked with non-believers.
Yeah.
So I think we're talking about two different things.
Sure.
There are times where God will birth a short relationship with somebody, say, you're here for this reason. There's always exceptions to the rule. I'm talking about a good best friend that you have for 30 years, and that's what I'm talking about, very best friend.
When I came back to Bakersfield, and I was living with my best friend in his house, and we both got saved, we had to come up with a few better rules because when it came to women, my boundary was the front door, his was the bedroom door. And it just, together, it didn't work. So we had to have a conversation, but we had the same spiritual value that we wanted to make sure we didn't fall into immorality. And so just having that conversation with the believer helped because I was able to do it. Now, if he was not a believer...
Well, how could you live in that home?
Yeah, I couldn't. So it was...
You're going to be intimate every night and stuff, and you're going to drive me nuts. That's putting a spirit of lust in me. I got to get out of here.
So we both like, hey, no, then they can't come in. When I say they, women can't come in the house because we were trying to help each other. But without him having that same spirituality, which is a value for us both now, we had to work with each other. That makes sense?
Well, yeah, totally.
Yes.
And going back to that verse, Dad, I'm glad you mentioned that. I just wrote that down too. 1 Corinthians 15:33, bad company corrupts good morals. I looked at the context of that, and in the context of that, the church is getting off base and they're starting to forget what's important.
Yep.
And it's because they allowed the influence of other people to come in and steer them the wrong direction. And so I think when that happens, there's a big difference between that and still talking to somebody if they call you or
totally different.
Something or whatever.
Totally
but
different.
I do agree at the beginning that we call them baby Christians, right? You first get saved, you first become your first introduction to Christ is this miracle and it's this amazing thing, but following that is a set of disciplines that you have to learn.
Let me give you an easy illustration, and I've used this before. One day, a mother came to her son and said, "I want to know something. Why did you catch that sparrow and put him in the same cage with our songbird?" He said, "I caught it." "Why did you put the sparrow in the cage with our songbird?" He said, "I wanted to teach the sparrow to sing." But in 2 weeks, the songbird was chirping. And so...
you know why that is? It's because as humans, we are wired to take the easy route.
Yeah.
We're wired because
it's good.
because of survival skills that we've learned throughout the day and age. We are wired to take the easiest route.
Yeah.
And when somebody comes
Survival.
in and says, "Why are you doing it the hard way?"
Yeah.
Tom, why are you lifting the most weight?
Right.
Like, why are you lifting that much weight when you can do less?
Yep.
You know, why are you not eating that when you can eat this?
Yeah.
Right. And those little compromises do affect you over time. And honestly, it took me a long time to realize the why, because I feel like when I was younger, and this is no offense to anything that was done prior when I was younger, but I just never really, understood the why as much as I understood this list of do's and don'ts.
Right.
The list of do's and don'ts are important, but they're important when you understand the why.
Yeah, and we imply that you knew a lot of the whys.
Sure.
And that's where parents can't imply that.
But here's the truth. The truth is our church has really grown up in that respect. And we do teach the why now. And churches in general have grown a lot. And I mean, man, you've been at this for
almost 50 years.
Yeah, I don't want to age you, but yeah, it's been a long time. So you've seen a cultural shift. I've seen a cultural shift, and I've seen a shift that's still happening. Tom, we're working with some of these college kids coming up, and this young. I'm a little nervous because this Gen Z group, they are very, very, very leery of being misled. If you say one thing that misleads them, you're out of the club. You know,
True.
They want it to be real.
They do.
They do want it to be real.
You know, I remember this experience like it was yesterday, because I had a good friend group, and I remember when my values towards alcohol changed. You know, when I started to realize alcohol wasn't good for me, not just because the Bible said it, that it just wasn't. I had to remove myself from the locations that served alcohol. So a lot of my friends would still go to the bars, and I would say, "Why can't we go to a movie?"
Well, now the movies are bars too.
You substituted something, yes.
Yes, I was like, hey, so I wanted to stay in that same friend group, and I came up and I go, now it's real important that I'm not around this, because that is not good for me.
I joke, Tom, but I respect that because it's a move for the three parts of health, right? Spiritual, mental, physical.
Right.
Yes.
All of the decisions that I've seen you guys make, I'm starting to understand the importance of those things as I age too, because I'm like, man, I want to be healthy in every respect.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about, because this plays around with Tom's saying. One of an enemy of good values is compromise.
Oh man.
Now, I will say that I've superimposed some values on this value of compromise. For example, I go to In-N-Out Burger every month. If I went more often, In-N-Out Burger or Taco Bell, it's like a shark when they taste blood. Once I get that flavor in my mouth, I want to go every day.
I'm with you.
And so I have to superimpose values on compromise. In other words, compromise is an enemy of good values, but I'll compromise once a week, no more than once a week. That's it. Yeah. That's it. Because, Jesus said, he said, the devil is coming, and when he comes, he has nothing in me. Says he has no hold over me. Yeah. See, compromise can be very dangerous. I remember times when I was a Christian and I go, they say that's a sin, and I don't know. I think I'll try it one time. And I go, oh my gosh, this is great. This is great. That was bad. Jesus, when he made that statement, the devil is coming, but he has nothing in me. He has no hold over me. I think one thing that he meant was, you know what? I haven't went out there and experimented with a lot of things. I haven't went out there and experienced a lot of things. So he really has nothing to tempt me with, because I don't know what it's like to live in sin. And I think that was one of his power statements there. There's a lot of things in life that I wished I would not have compromised and done, because the devil wouldn't have a handle on me now to tempt me to go back to it, because when I did it, I agreed with the Bible that sin is pleasurable for a season.
Right.
Does that make any sense to you?
No, the shark and blood thing, I'm stuck there, because that's such a big word picture, because we constantly are willing to put ourselves in situations where it's a bloody mess and we know we're going to get right in there with it. And the things that we compromise with, if we have a thing that constantly we go back to that causes us to sin, why put yourself in that situation if you know you're going to go all in on it?
Let me get really carnal here and really transparent. I mean, I was a Christian, saved 2 or 3 years when I went into a strip joint for the first time. I went in one and I was a Christian, and I went, ooh la la, I kind of like it in here. I did.
Right.
And I went outside right away in repentance and God, I'm sorry, forgive me, boo-hoo, boo-hoo. But now, after that, not recently, the devil had a handle on me going, hey, go back in. You know how much fun that was? So compromise can be an enemy of good values. I have an old saying: you don't have to take the lid off of a sewer to know that it stinks.
Yeah.
It stinks because we know it stinks. And so, does that make any sense to you that compromise is
and just to, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but the other day I got a ticket. I got pulled over, and I saw this motorcycle cop behind me. It's always motorcycle cops. I don't know why, but I see this guy behind me, and he pulls me over, and he gets out and walks up to the window, and he says, "You know why I pulled you over?" I said, "No, I have no idea. Honestly, I have no idea. I'm sitting there thinking, this is a mistake. You made a mistake, buddy." He said, "Because you just made a U-turn, and there's a big sign in front of you that says that there's no U-turn here." And what's funny is it's by an intersection that I see all the time, that I did know, but I wasn't in that mindset. And I said something to him. He probably thinks I full on lied to him, because I said I didn't even realize that I couldn't make a U-turn, which is true, because at the moment I didn't realize it. But then I went back and I thought, of course I can't make a U-turn here. It was a weird thing. But you know what wasn't on my mind that day? What wasn't on that mind that day is I'm in a vehicle right now, and I need to drive safely, because A, I don't want to get in a wreck and hurt somebody, and B, I don't want to get a ticket or get pulled over or get, like, I don't want these things. And so I wasn't thinking about that.
Good,
I was allowing a distraction to keep me from.
Isn't it a value to drive safely? Is that a big value in our mind, so we don't hurt somebody else and not have to live with that?
I mean, it should be.
Did you get a ticket?
Oh, yeah.
You know, Pastor, as you talk about what are value killers, and this is something that's real practical, is that don't get too busy.
It's true.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, because you get too busy,
burn out.
and pretty soon you start letting your guard down. You get tired. You get melly. Pastor, you always said it, and I never realized this. Why do the shopping channels come on at night? Because they know your inhibitions are down.
You're burned out,
and you may have a value that says, "I don't buy any more of those."
So Tom, I'm a little bit past the shopping on the TV generation, but I always buy stuff late at night. I always buy stuff on the internet. I'm like, I need those pants.
They know that. They know that.
But there again, I mean,
Tyler too back there. Impulse buyer.
You just don't want to let that guard down. One of the things that I think helps you with your values is having another value that predicates that. Like you said, value and value. You know, there again, don't put yourself in a compromising position.
You can't. You have to learn what those compromising situations are and try to avoid them.
Can I say something else to keep this going? It's not only important to understand your own value system. It's very important to understand others' value systems, because if you don't recognize that they don't line up with you, then that's a problem. One it could be an individual, or it could be a company, right? You see all the social media companies in the news now, right? Everybody's upset with them because they feel that they've been lied to. But Vince and I, we went to some social media, I won't say which ones, but we went to some social media seminars early on. And we learned early on that their value was to take money from the consumer, was for you to pay them advertising money. And that value seeps down into their culture. Right. And so they put advertisers first. So whatever the company values, that's what they value. And so their values are all mixed up. And so it's interesting to me to see Americans wake up to this idea that, wait, the social media companies they're not good. They're not for us. They're not trying to help us. Now, we use them for good, of course, but in the end, their whole goal is to get you to buy those pants late at night, Tom. That's what their goal is. And it works sometimes, but it's important to understand institutions, individuals, groups, people groups. It's important to understand their values. How many people, Tom, they jump? I was listening to Joe Rogan's podcast, and this is funny. He was talking about Hollywood. You'll appreciate this. And he was saying that if the executives in Hollywood were all staunch conservatives, that everybody in Hollywood would be a gun-toting conservative. And he was making fun of the group. And it was funny because it's true. When people start lining up with the values of an institution because that can do something for them, or a people group because that can do something for them, it's all mixed up. It's all messed up. Instead, be honest about where you are and what your values are. Right?
Well, even in the Bible about not being a stumbling block to people that are weaker in the faith. Yeah. You have to consider their values. Even if it's not your value, it's their value, and you need to respect that.
And I think one of the biggest, you're talking about the factors that keep you from living out your values. One of the biggest is fear.
Yeah.
Honestly, because it's easier to just jump in with the crowd. It's easier to blend in. It's easier to go the way everyone's going. And so, you've got to learn. The best what's the word? Antidote, not anecdote. Antidote. I get those two mixed up. The best antidote for fear is fear. It's respect. It's understanding who God is. It's fear for God.
Yeah.
Right? If you fear and respect God as your Father, then all of a sudden you're going to be.
That's true.
You're going to realize that He
That's true.
has the authority. He has the way to protect you, to take care of you. You respect Him and you fear Him. All of a sudden, everything else seems so small. And so I think that battling fear is a huge part of values.
That's good. That's a good point, Josh. And again, God's given me a word over the cancer that's been kind of, lingering in me for the last few years. And He gave me a precise word one day, and He says, "Because you fear me, I will save you from death." And I don't know all of the connotations to that,
Well,
but
that fear keeps you on task.
it does. It keeps me in track, and then it also, I think He wants that taught to others too. See, we don't have many people that fear God today, and that's a whole different topic for another day.
Well, the Bible says that's the beginning of knowledge.
Beginning.
That's when you start to put things in
Yes.
perspective. I
Yes.
think it's real important, and sometimes as it's got to be something that we're safe with. And you guys have young kids and you got grandkids. Is that you have to watch who you want to imitate, who you want to emulate.
true. It's true.
There again, I think it was pretty cool that my kids got to come up in a generation with Tim Tebow.
That's really good.
Tim Tebow, he spoke loudly when he said chastity and is a virtue that I have, because he was very popular. He was the athlete. And when they heard it from him, it was reinforcing some values that we
Praise
had.
God for these guys.
And so if you're out there and you do have a platform, I think it's very, people should be skeptical. One thing that I am big with now is that so many kids are wanting to lift and they want to look a certain way. And I really have a problem when people are talking about, they call it, I'm natty, which I'm natural.
Natty?
Right.
Yeah. Natty is a word that they use because
I would think they had gnats around them.
Well, Huntington's probably
I'm
looking
natty.
at some of these
Or
people.
I'm naughty.
No, I've heard, natty, yeah. Are you natty or not?
And so as you're out there, if you're looking at the sports world or the competitive world, everybody is doing a PED. Everyone's doing the performance enhancing drug. So you've got to be careful. And I remember when my son-in-law kept asking me things, and I kept telling him, if they're looking better than the average bear, they're probably not telling you the truth. And I think it's very important.
Look at their necks. Look at their necks.
I think it's very important that people, if you're representing something, you want to represent it well, because the Bible says that instead of, you don't want to be the person that causes somebody to stumble.
Right.
And I also believe it says as you measure out, it gets measured back. So you have to be really careful, because there's somebody watching.
Yeah.
And I think this is important, because the Bible says if we seek to save our life, we lose it. But if we live our life for His sake, we're going to find it. And I know it doesn't make any sense, but I think there's a value there to saying, I want to be a person that somebody can count on.
Right.
They ask me a question, I'll tell them.
I got to remember that and not mess that up. I don't want to be in the gym and look at some beautiful girl and say, "Hey, I'm naughty." I mean natty. I mean natty. Natty, not naughty.
I'm not. That's good.
Well,
I forgot the word.
Just don't talk to the beautiful girl at all. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
That's the best case scenario.
I think what Tom said too, just being like you said it, Josh said being honest, and you said people are watching. I think as you come into your values and you're declaring these values to people, you say, these are the things you believe. If you say, well, family's my value, but you're never with your family, or if you have this thing, you might say whatever is your value, church is but you're never there. That's where hypocrisy starts to creep in, and people aren't going to take you serious, and you're going to lose your leverage to have impact on people.
Let me go back to something you just said about losing your life again. That's
good. Yeah.
Losing your life to save it. The way I see losing your life is not like, well, I'm giving up. I'm going to lay down and let the world,
Right.
The way I see losing your life is kind of like, we've all seen the movie scene where you have the lieutenant, the colonel, he comes up and he says, well, listen, guys, we don't have the order to do this mission, but I'm accepting volunteers.
Yeah.
And then one by one, each person raises their hand. And what they're doing is they're putting themselves all in with each other, with the community, with a greater purpose.
Yes.
And I think that's what that scripture actually means. It means to lose your life for something bigger than
goes
yourself.
back to selflessness, right?
Yeah.
You're saying I'm going to be selfless.
Yeah, and that's a much more exciting thing.
That will lead me into one of the last things I want to say about some of the enemies of good values. is not considering the future.
Oh, man.
You have to regularly consider the future. Like sometimes in the past, I've given a working definition for wisdom. Wisdom is like playing a game of chess. It's making this move today because you're considering several moves down the line. It's not just this move today that matters. It's those moves down the line that's going to affect things. And so I think we have to keep our mind on the future and say, if I want this in the future, then this has to be my values today. And we need to regularly meditate on that when we go on walks. Like one of my values is taking a walk by the lake at Bear Valley Springs up in Tehachapi. Man, I value that time. And very often I like to think about the future and going, I know what I want to do today, but how will that affect me 5 or 10 or 20 moves down the line? And so that's an enemy of good values, I think, by not thinking about the future down the road.
People are wondering, what values to take. I think that's a beautiful value of just taking that time alone so that you know what to do when it does get difficult, when those, influences come into your life, so you can say no. A lot of times we should say no,
Oh, yeah.
You can't say yes to everything
No,
and
you
accomplish what you want to
Values are important, and it'll change or influence the trajectory of your life. And again, for our audience, you are where you're at today, right now, because of decisions you made in the past. And those decisions were a lot influenced by values, whether right or wrong. Change your values, you will change your future.
That's right. Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you guys again for listening. We love you guys, and tune in every week. Tuesdays are when these come out. And
please talk to us. We want to hear from you.
I
know I'm hearing from quite a few people.
What the heck?
Yeah, please talk to us. Tell us where you're at. Tell us a little something about you. And then
Tom, where can they find you on social?
TomTouchdown.com.
There you go. He's got his own website.
Yes.
Perfect.
There it
All right.
yes.
Yeah, it's easy.
You can find me and my dad on Facebook. Vince.
Email, Facebook, you can
You'll
find
never
us
find
anywhere.
me.
You'll never
You'll
find
never
us.
find
Good
me.
luck. That's a challenge for some of you.
But we love you guys.
We'll talk to you guys later.